Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Wednesday, August 5th. We had a bit of a false start, so I'm just going to start it over again. And basically say what I said before is, with the crossover that's going on right now, with Code Geass, I am dangerously close to becoming an anime YouTuber, which would definitely ruin my fandom of anime, and certainly watching a passive art form would be a different experience versus playing an interactive art form. This quest event for the crossover I almost have completely done. Last reward to collect is the Seer's Globe, and I'll get that just by beating Cornelia, the easy boss, a couple times with each of the characters, so 16 more games basically. Sudaka was fairly difficult, and Charles was obviously impossible because we never beat him. But I do have to applaud the way they set things up here, where you don't have to be an expert. If you're a new player, you can just grind it out. Like, if I had beaten Charles, there's a chance I could have gotten all 2,000 points, but at the minimum I would have gotten 500 points, which would have been the equivalent of saving at least an hour. For the accountability section, I'm going through the main story, and it's definitely a different experience because Gears of Rebellion Uprising is what I most recently finished, and I thought that would have just finished the story and everything would be start over, much like how Guild War started it over after Morningstar. But no, it kind of just transitioned directly into teasing into Seeds of Conflict. So chapter 8 through chapter 5 seem to be the equivalent of the length as far as chapter 4 and chapter 3, which is a smart move, but it's still not the best experience. Like, I was having a real hard time paying attention and a real hard time caring in Gears of Rebellion Uprising, and it's probably mostly just burnout. I'll be happy to be done with the main story so then I can just focus on playing arena and multiplayer on a daily basis and getting the daily quests. This visual novel in a collectible card game is not a concept that I agree with. As far as the card collections go, if I come over here and just look at rotation cards, it shows that I have 31 pages, although very often not 3 copies of every card that are in rotation, versus 46 pages. So there's 15 pages with 8 cards in total that I just don't have. But if I put this off long enough and the rotation changes, this number could go down more than it goes up, particularly since we're sitting on gold waiting to open packs for the next expansion, whenever that happens, whether that's a week from now or 3 months from now. If I was to liquefy all the extra cards I have, I would get up to 8,430 vials, which is not a large number by any means. I've also run into one card that I have 10 copies of, and I'm wondering if 10 is a magic number at a certain point in that will lower the odds of getting yet another copy of it. You really won't ever know, but if I eventually end up with 11 copies of the same card, then I know 10 isn't a hard limit, and then my guess at that point would be it's probably 99 copies that you can have. You at most you only need 3 copies, and in realistic terms you only need 3 of the non-animated versions, but if you want to get really fancy you would want 3 copies of the animated versions. But yeah, it depends, I guess, how much money you really want to spend on it, because you could easily spend a lot of money to get the animated complete collection, but compared to Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, I think you can't actually spend that much money just to get everything if you do it right, particularly when you have a lot of cards given to you as temporary versions of cards. So it's fairly redundant and pointless to go into a card like this and say, hey, let's spend 3,500 vials to craft this when we already have this, unless we just want a second copy. And maybe there is some limitation there where you could have a second copy. And since this is where it says X times 10, I guess the indication here is that they would be willing to have this text go further and further. So it could potentially say X times a million plus a million, although that would be fairly silly, and you'd probably have to hack things to have that happen. When we look at all cards, including the cards not in rotation, I have 48 pages versus 143 pages, and there is a certain level of cards that could be liquefied because they're the non-animated versions, and I already have animated versions of them. But for today, since we don't have any daily quests, I've kind of failed to get the daily quests to line up. My crazy insomnia way of doing things and recording an hour of footage and then sleeping for 4 hours or getting distracted for 4 hours is still becoming a factor. But ideally, I would have not really touched Shadowverse at all over the course of the past couple days, and the daily quest would still be here, and then there would be something a little bit different and a little bit more focused to work on. But since that's not the case, what we'll do is we'll just play ranked. And one of the things that I wanted to do with ranked is come over here and let's come to this point and use pre-built decks on unlimited, or default decks on unlimited. By the way, I've now built 2 decks. I deleted all the other decks because they were just kind of randomly created decks or decks that didn't matter. But yeah, I've pre-built 2 decks, and yeah, they're not great. Let me just leave it at that. I'm not getting anywhere far with that. But I think it is worth our time, since I almost certainly am just going to lose, that it is worth our time to get up to 1,200 in the unlimited class.
Enhance fire.
I will say, in the most recent chapter, you don't have him saying activate enhance fire. A lot of the characters with their kind of annoying catchphrases from the first couple chapters in the main story have been played down. The writing is approaching 6.5 out of 10. But there's still a little bit of weirdness. Like, they had been teasing these Fury characters in the chapter, and then the Furies show up and they're just like giant robots, very similar to the giant robots that we had been fighting the whole time before that point, and that did effectively not accomplish much, because I don't think those Fury characters turn into any cards, or if they do turn into cards, they're not cards that I've found and seen in my collection. And it kind of doesn't even matter, because Steel Rebellion as a card expansion is where all of the robots / androids from that story would have been released, and Steel Rebellion is not even in rotation anymore. So the main story has this problem of being particularly aged and quickly aged for new players. There's really not a lot of reason to play the main story unless you just want to play sort of scripted but not really scripted. Like battles, that's about all I could say that you're gonna get out of it is if you want to take on AI characters and not go through practice mode, which, remember, practice mode still exists, and that kind of conflicts with it. You would do the main story, but I think most people wouldn't really benefit from doing the main story. In retrospect, 4 years in, it's almost like the main story is there to convince people to play the old cards, which there is a certain idea there that is never really pushed or propagated with Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering. Like, old cards in Hearthstone are ignored completely because Wild is ignored completely. Non-standard cards in Magic are ignored completely. They want them to be valueless so that the player, that the people have to buy new packs. Shadowverse does not inherently feel like it is that greedy. It does clearly want you to buy packs, but in the scale of greediness, it's kind of at the bottom. There's not much to report, but there was a adult card game called War of Venus from Nutaku. I said I was going to check that out like almost a month ago, and I finally got around to messing with it, looking at it, and yeah, it's a garbage adult card game that doesn't do anything special and doesn't make any sense that you'd want to play it. Which, ideally, I would like to see adult games increase their quality, but I imagine they sell just as well when they're low effort games as they do when they're high effort games.
Don't hurt me. Fate binds us all. Hey, let's play.
Okay.
This'll do it.
I don't think I would want to evolve any creatures. So yeah,
Victory through steel.
I'm still playing Destiny Child. The current event is going to end tonight in their cycle point, which is around midnight, and they're going to maintenance mode for overnight, and then the next event will start.
The might of Black Eye and Sacred Forest. They're picking on me.
I didn't get incredibly lucky in the event, but my characters are strong enough that they just grinded out and earned everything that I wanted to earn, but it's not leaving me with any extra, which it would have been nice to have a little bit more extra.
It won't be long now.
But I am definitely doing
My sword.
amazingly well with okay, like I'm doing amazingly well with just having all the characters leveled up, and it does feel like I'm approaching 6 months until I'm at the top tier of that game and have everything as much at maximum as possible. And at a certain point, it might hit a point where they just introduce characters too slowly for a late game player. But then I think I'd be so pot committed, it would be hard to justify not continuing to play. Let's do this. And this. Yeah, we're approaching the point in this game where I'm about to run out of cards, and that means I've run out of things I can do. And I've yet to figure out if there is some kind of strategy where you hold back and don't play everything. I kind of think you play everything. And I think it really just kind of boils down to, is your cards better than your opponent's cards? And if they aren't, then you lose. We have a probably average amount of news today.
My lord.
So, there's a level of controversy apparently brewing in the fact that Spider-Man is going to be exclusive to the PlayStation versions of Marvel Avengers. Comment here I'm seeing from Crystal Dynamics head Scott Amos. Says that Spider-Man exclusivity has no effect on crossplay or cross-progression plans, which, like, that is kind of something that feels like you're trying to confuse the issue, like, because effectively they're saying that the exclusivity of Spider-Man is not going to lead to more exclusivity at the moment until it does, and I don't think that's what people's fears would really be, or people's complaints really would be. People are upset that they wanted to play as Spider-Man and play it on their console that wasn't the PlayStation. And it's like, he's basically making an argument that I kicked you in the shins, but don't worry, I don't plan on kicking you in the balls too.
My lord.
Let's see, I'm gonna scroll down my Twitter feed just to start here. And then we'll cover the news. I think my chat's messed up, so I don't think I'll be able to see the chat today. So, apologies if somebody is chatting on the chat. It's still kind of a rough position that we're in right now because of the fact that all I'm doing is the main story of Shadowverse. I also have kind of just blown uploading videos and put them all out of order, and just am gonna have a mess scheduling and a whole bunch of work that needs to be done scheduling that I don't want to do. I had almost caught up completely, and now I am way far away from being caught up. So yeah, that's not fun. And yeah,
You must die.
certainly sucks.
Enhance. Fire.
And somewhere around December, or somewhere in the doldrums of January and February, when nobody is usually watching YouTube videos anyways, although who knows what it's going to be in 2021. Like, everything could be different at any point going forward. But either somewhere in December or January or February, there is just going to be one of the major games being covered. It's just going to be the main story of Shadowverse for a month. So it's going to be a month of me, very annoyingly to a lot of people, criticizing the writing of Shadowverse just to get through with it. And even once I've finished all of that and all of that's aired, there's still a ton of work in the background to actually get the challenges done to get more gold. Ideally, I want all the gold that you can possibly get from the main story, which is probably, roughly, I guess,
Don't call me short.
it's probably somewhere around 2,000 gold at most. Well, actually there might be a lot more than that, come to think of it. It might be as high as even 6,000 gold. But then at that point, that is your last opportunity, except for daily quests, to get any gold. And well, and you can't do the challenges or do the main story a second time to get more gold or anything like that.
Look after the others.
I should think about what is the next kind of game I would want to cover after Shadowverse, and almost certainly I'd want to look for something that is a very Western style first person shooter type game. Something very action heavy, something that is pretty dumb on story. There's a danger here that I will too quickly get pushed into covering too many Japanese centric games, and I don't want my channel to be 100% Japanese centric games. It would be kind of silly to jump into playing like a Neptunia game after this, even though I do want to cover the Neptunia games at one point. I need to try and balance it out some. And I want to potentially avoid playing too many visual novel type games, and effectively that is what the main story in Shadowverse is it's a visual novel type experience.
You are done for.
Okay,
Luminescence, shining hope.
still not
My
strong
lord.
enough.
Master.
So let's start covering the news. Gamma Sutra has an article here that Remedy Entertainment is hiring a programmer in Espoo, Finland. Remedy is the creator of Control, Quantum Break, Max Payne, Alan Wake, Death Rally. I suppose we will also talk about it later that Detroit Become Human has sold like 5 million copies after being listed on Steam for about a month or two, which honestly makes it feel very much like the only reason it's even made that much success is because they dropped the exclusivity. Like, because Detroit Become Human came out like a year and a half ago. And people didn't particularly love it. They didn't hate it. Well, they hated some parts of it, but I think that was mostly the frame rate and maybe some bad writing. There probably is a good comparison to compare like the experience of Detroit Become Human being a story that's mostly trying to tell a story and have very little gameplay, versus The Last of Us 2, which is a story that's trying to tell you a story, but also crams in a ridiculous amount of gameplay, mechanics, and grinding. I think most people would probably argue that The Last of Us 2, if they had to take their pick,
Don't underestimate
is
me.
more of a game
Enhance.
that you would want to play.
Fire.
Whereas the Detroit Become Humans almost become just interactive novel style experiences. And you certainly could mirror that there was controversies around Remedy Entertainment and there's controversies around The Last of Us 2. I saw someone trying something new, like a podcaster not known for talking about video games, trying to make a new podcast or testing it out, talking about The Last of Us 2. And I think they fairly pathetically, not to be just outright attacking, but they fairly pathetically failed to mention the controversies around The Last of Us 2. Even if it was just to mention the controversies around Last of Us 2 and say I didn't care about any of that or I didn't see any of that, they should have mentioned it. It is basically yellow journalism at a certain point to either willfully be ignorant of something that is so prevalent, or to actively censor the conversation away from it. But it was an interesting insight too of just bad video game criticism in a nutshell, because it was 100% positivity, nothing to criticize, nothing negative to say. It really was just like an hour-long podcast circle jerk type experience where they are just self-gratifying each other and self-gratifying the creator. A very California-esque type meeting, where I am definitely from the school that if you don't have anything negative to say or critical to say, at least in a video game, then you're not a video game critic, and you shouldn't be criticizing video games. That is part and parcel with what the job description is, to have something to critique. If you're coming out and saying if you're a movie critic and you say every movie is perfect in its own way, you're not a good movie critic.
Do you know my master?
Now, of course, there also are people who go wild with that, and their criticism at that point goes even beyond mine. If you're watching someone that literally hates everything, then you can perhaps pull some information from that, but you have to take it with a massive grain of salt, where you can't get anything from a critic that is just 100% positive. And it definitely has caused the creation of this subspecies of video game streamers and critics that aren't really critics, that they just say, yeah, I love this game, everything is positivity, that there's nothing that I'd ever say bad, you should buy this game, to the point where it's just like, oh, am I watching a paid advertisement at this point, or is this person just not capable of forming an opinion? Either of which could be the case.
Mana, come forth.
Yep. Yeah, I really see no use for the hyper-positive video game reviewers. But then again, I guess I'm the exact opposite of that, so I am fairly critical and definitely focus on the negative. which at some level kind of does ruin some games for me, but not terribly. Like, it can ruin games for me if I just want to turn my brain off and play a game. Like, Borderlands is probably a great example of that. If you want to just turn your brain off and play Borderlands and ignore all the BS things that have happened around Randy Pitchford, you can have a great time, certainly. But if you want to actually be a video game critic on Borderlands, and thinking particularly about like Borderlands 1, you've got to point out that the graphics look fairly rough. You've got to point out that at some point in the middle the quests get a little repetitive. That there are definitely subsections and areas in Borderlands 1 that you spend very little time in, and they are forgettable. That the main boss in Borderlands 1 is an uninteresting character that is just teased and then murdered very quickly, and you don't even really get to fight her. You have to point out that the main story without the DLC in Borderlands 1 is fairly bad and fairly generic. But the gameplay loop in Borderlands 1 is pretty great. Although in all fairness, I would also say that their hero system kind of sucks, because you can't just transfer over your experience to a different hero class. So particularly now in retrospect, if you want to get the full experience of Borderlands 1, you're talking at least 4 hero classes that you would have to start from level 0 and try to get to max level, which would take 2 playthroughs for each. So you're talking 8 playthroughs of a game before you even get to the sequel of the game, which is not likely that people now would have time for that or even care to do that. Then also in retrospect, you could say Borderlands does not have a good onboarding process really for people who haven't played any of the series up until this point. So you're left at that point either skipping straight to Borderlands 3 and ignoring all of the previous games, or you spend potentially 300 hours playing Borderlands 1, Borderlands 2, Borderlands pre-sequel, which I haven't even played yet, and then the Telltale games maybe need to be played also.
Be gone.
Let's go ahead and hit that. Moving on with the news, we have a TechRaptor article here. Famed Akihabara Sega Arcade is shutting down. So, Akihabara is pretty overpriced nowadays as the Electric District, the anime video game district, shopping center area. It's become very commercialized and touristy, and most like most tourist traps that they've is just gotten really expensive, and it's not really worth it for even Japanese people to go to Akihabara.
Be gone.
Yeah. Most people pronounce it Akibara, but actually it's Akihabara. But, and I mispronounce it half the time. Sega in particular had been for a very long time doing fairly well running arcades in Japan and running like pachinko parlors in Japan. And I imagine they still will have some. Also, all the buildings definitely go very vertical. So you go into a building like this, and typically there will be five stories and 5 different types of businesses. Often the adult content is like on the top floor. So like there's like an adults only store at the top. I imagine in this case, since we're seeing Sega in front of all of this, that these are stairs that just go all the way up, and so all 5 floors or more actually were the arcade. So that's probably somewhat around the economic downturn issues in general, but also Sega is in this weird position where they've failed to really do anything with their brand, and because of that they've really failed to keep their business afloat, as it were. Yeah, I don't know how any other way to say it is that, yeah, Sega has been just living off of the profits of their arcades and their old games, and not really done anything at all as far as they really haven't done anything at all as far as trying to make new Sega properties. There has not been like a new Sega mascot character tried to be introduced in probably 30 years. There hasn't been any consoles or anything from Sega in probably 30 years. The Sonic and those characters have failed miserably time and time again to be any kind of property that sells. So yeah, I don't know how Sega has even really stayed in business as long as it has, because there's definitely an issue there of mismanagement. And I don't know if this inherently implies that Sega's gonna go out of business. Shouldn't go that crazy. A lot of businesses could go out of business. In all fairness, the world economy and the economy in general could change quite a lot, and that might be for the better, or that might be for the worse. But yeah, at the current moment, we'll just have to wait and see. I would still say, though, if you were having a short trip and you don't have friends that could send you around to other stores or buy things online for you and have them ready for you, or ship them to outside of Japan, like ideally you'd want to coordinate with your friends to order whatever you think you want to buy at Akihabara and just hand it to you, and then you walk out of it as in your luggage as you leave the country. That would be the best way to shop. But if you don't have anybody that's going to go through that extra effort, or that's asking too much, then yeah, wasting all the money at Akihabara is fine, and it is still going to be an experience. Like, there is basically nowhere short of Times Square in the United States where you can go walk up and down streets and see so many billboards, so many signs. I don't think they have a ton of LEDs or light up things in Akihabara. I guess you might say Bourbon Street in Louisiana might be a somewhat similar experience, and there are some other experiences somewhat like that, but not really amazingly like that.
I'll devour you all. Stop.
8.
Iron my
There we
face.
go.
Solid fighter.
Well, we got a victory, which is actually an accomplishment at this point.
I only did what I had to.
So how much is that going to jump you up? 100. And so we're now at beginner 1. And that did give us some kind of achievement. So we'll stick with the winning deck and keep on playing. I probably should just try and rush through this stream. I should also mention that I've seen a couple of new subscribers, and I've seen a couple of people that are commenting basically the same thing every time, that they like the video and share it on Twitter. I say thanks, although a lot of those videos also feel like they don't have any views at all when I look at them. So I think that there might be just a bot that's saying that and commenting on my videos, which, like, at a certain point, I don't know if 0 views, more comments than views on a video somehow does derank and de-emphasize videos. Maybe my channel has been hurt in the past through things like that, through people just trying to destroy other people's channels to potentially raise up their own channels.
I live by the sword.
I don't know. I don't know. That's not what YouTube says. They say engagement is always good, but I'm not sure I think YouTube even knows what the truth is. Like, but I have gotten a couple subscribers lately, so that is nice. Unfortunately, we still are at the point where I'm somewhere around 370 subscribers. You need 1,000 to be monetized with the AdSense at the moment. By the time I got 1,000 subscribers, unless some video just went viral and I gained 500 or 1,000 subscribers overnight, I think by the time I got to 1,000 subscribers, they would just pull the rug out from under me again and say you need 10,000 subscribers. Also, they review each channel, so I wouldn't put it past YouTube to say, no, even though you do have 1,000 subscribers, you're not eligible for monetization just because. Not even having a real reason, just because they're trying clearly to keep as much of the money in the hands of big popular celebrities. And yeah, YouTube is, without getting repetitive, YouTube is seemingly consistently getting worse and worse for small creators, and one major part of that is that they're allowing and automatically forcing a whole bunch of mid-roll ads into people's videos, even if people didn't want mid-roll ads in their videos. So, yeah. At what point do we just admit that Susan Wojcicki is not just incompetent, but actively malicious? Because I think we're at that point where either it's Susan Wojcicki, which I think it is, the person in charge, or some shadow group of governance inside of YouTube, some group of employees that are acting against the wills of the CEO.
The real battle begins.
Somebody clearly there is acting maliciously, and at a certain point, you kind of know it is because advertisers are leading YouTube by the nose and asking them to do things that they should know or actively do know will actually harm the platform. We know that the big channels and mainstream entertainment, TV and movies would love to see YouTube be destroyed, and they've exerted their influence on advertisers, so advertisers then exert their influence on YouTube. Where YouTube really needed to stand out as no, we're the rebel, and we're not going to do things the way things used to be done, because the way things used to be done are not acceptable anymore. And people totally know that. It's like, if you're not time shifting TV these days, if you're not skipping the commercials, you're probably having a horrible experience.
Activate. Enhance. Fire.
YouTube should be the Netflix model, not the Hulu model, which was all about putting ads in streaming videos, even if you were paying for the premium service. At least I think that's how Hulu was. Maybe they finally changed. Hulu also designed to fail completely, and has mostly failed, and split. Like the thing Hulu should have done, if it wasn't designed to fail, is it should have prevented us from having CBS All Access and Peacock and Disney Plus and all of those separate services, and it didn't. Moving on to video game news, Gamasutra has an article. Take-Two boosts new Q1 records as revenue jumps 54% year over year. Okay. So, they seem to have good numbers. Although, at a certain point, I think it is also fair to say a lot of these companies are straight up manipulating and lying about their records, and they are boosting their records. That they are making just completely fraudulent statements that they know they'll never get investigated for, so then they can sell their shares off or do cheap share buybacks if the price goes down too much. It's the reason why the stock market now more than ever has very little connection to what the actual economy is in the United States. Because there's just nothing but cheating. And then, yeah. It's all gonna eventually come toppling down, this tower of cards. Moving on, OpenCritic has an article here. Konami has made an official Silent Hill Twitter, which is probably to say that they're gonna make some new pachinko machine. I mean, even if Konami does make a true Silent Hill game on a console and not like on a mobile phone or in a pachinko machine, that almost certainly won't mean anything, because the people that made Silent Hill good have long since been either beaten down or left Konami, and Konami does not have any talent or any skill, as far as I can tell, to make any kind of good game. They wouldn't probably pay for it even if they did have talent. So the idea of holding your breath and hoping for a Silent Hill game is kind of ridiculous. If anything, I would say Konami probably made this Twitter just so somebody else didn't have the Twitter feed instead, and to act out of spite against Kojima trying to make something like a Silent Hill game, which In all fairness to that thought, Kojima should not make a Silent Hill game with the word silent or hill or any synonyms with silent and hill in the name. In the same way that Bloodborne is clearly a Castlevania spin-off, but Bloodborne having its own title, having its own name, works a lot better instead of him trying to come up with
Shining hope.
something that sounds like Castlevania, or just trying to call something Castlevania.
My lord.
Like, what could be synonyms for Castlevania? You could call it like fort or manor, and then you could call it like manor paranoia or paranoid manor. That would be a kind of interesting spin-off name, synonymous name to Castlevania. But I don't even know if most people would get that was a reference to Castlevania. Whereas Bloodstained works fairly nicely, particularly assuming that there are vampires in Bloodstained. I would argue Bloodstained actually did a very nice job of changing things up and having a different kind of story with the same kind of gameplay, which is what people really wanted. Like, I don't think anybody particularly cared too much about the story of Castlevania and Alucard, because it was a pretty dumb story. Even in the Netflix series, they kind of have to work fairly hard to turn that into an interesting tale to tell with the Belmonts. And in the long run, it really is just like Van Helsing versus Dracula. And they just, instead of calling him Van Helsing, they called him the Belmonts. Zombies. Bane.
So lonely.
Attack. We have a game that came out on Steam. This was tweeted by somebody I followed, called Beautiful Desolation, which I think is kind of like a Wasteland game, a Fallout 1 or 2 type clone, from the looks of it. I don't think it's like an XCOM game where it's tactical. It does look fairly interesting. I kind of would like to be able to, at some point, go and play Fallout 1 and 2, but I don't know when I'd ever have time for this. It's already on my following list, and it's rated mostly positive, so I think I can put it on the wish list at this point. It's $19.99. It's from the creators of Stasis and the Kane game that I covered. What is this? Deluxe content. So, yeah. That does explain why I followed them. And I would say Beautiful Desolation's art style does seem like it is less of a horror game than Kane was. Although, honestly, this might all be in the same universe. Okay. Do I want to have him draw cards? Does he have one card in his hand, or is... Yeah, he does. Interesting. Look how big the cards are over here and how small the cards are over there.
Now, let's have a look-see.
That's a smart move, I would say.
Welcome to the city of hopes and dreams.
Although it kind of feels like there should be a play mat under their cards, so you know that they are cards and that they don't blend into the background, it'd be fairly easy to think that that is just a portrait in the background. I still haven't gotten around to playing Stasis, which I would pretty much appreciate that if I actually did get around to that. Let's see. I'm gonna try and bring up the chat again while I'm here, because it would really suck if people have been trying to chat to me and I've just been ignoring them. Let's see if we can pull this off. Pop out chat and suspend the tab now. And then send the chat to my phone. There we go. I'm still trying to find like a really good system to be able to write over the screen. There is a way, certainly, to share your screens to
I have transcended death.
To share your screens. I've probably lost here. To your PC, but a lot of times it's through like a web page, or and I kind of would prefer it to be through a specific app, something a little bit faster, less delay, something that OBS could work with a little bit better. Although maybe it wouldn't really matter, because OBS can have browser sources, so I guess I could have it share via website and see how that works. But that is also just a side project amongst a list of many side projects that I'm not particularly working on, shouldn't work on, should focus on the main stuff of scheduling videos and recording videos. That's all I have time for, or all I want to spend time on. Yep. If I wasn't so opposed to the idea of having an unpaid intern, I'd get an unpaid intern and have them do a lot of things. And who knows, with the current economy, that there is that possibility where people just, like, well, I guess if universal basic income happened, that's the thing. If people were just making enough to live off of and they were just bored and wanted to do something, at that point it might be more realistic to say, okay, I'll let you schedule my videos or make thumbnails for my videos or moderate the chat. I live by the sword. But yeah, I'm not sure if we're at a point where that makes sense. Plus, I think in the idea where internships are supposed to be 100% beneficial for the intern and not beneficial really at all to the employer, I'm not sure there's more than a 6 weeks to maybe 6 months of tricks and tips I can give a person, and an experience I could give to a person before they would just be doing very repetitive things.
How much is in it for me?
There is that there is a YouTube channel where at a certain point the person who was the on-air talent realized that he really didn't need to be the on-air talent, and he just hired people to replace him, and that was kind of a odd expansion, certainly. And you wouldn't
Cowardly crew.
usually have on-air talent willing to replace themselves. Moving on, Gamatsu has the Famitsu review scores from issue 1654. We have here a picture of what looks like a visual novel, romance visual novel. So, a game called Carrion for Xbox and Switch was given 33 out of 40. Cupid Parasite for the Switch was 33 out of 40. I bet this is Cupid Parasite, if I was to guess. Which I guess I just did. And I shouldn't say the word guess 3 times in a row. Now 4 times. They have a game called Hotel Sowells, Sowls, which is 29 out of 40.
I can devour your dreams. I can devour your dreams.
Let's have a sweet time.
Let's see.
You will soon learn.
What a banquet. Tasty.
This wasn't worth it.
Well, I've lost anyways. Let's see. They have
Your strength
a game
is
called
for me.
Metalloid Origins for the PS4 and Switch and Vita. Wow. Still a Vita release. For 29 out of 40. Neon Abyss for PS4 and Switch, 30 out of 40. And then Toho Labyrinth Jinsokyo to Tenkan no Taiju for PS4 and Switch, which is 27 out of 40. So bad Toho shoot 'em up game. But it seems like. We still are very consistently having not really big games come out and nothing being rated very well. 33 out of 40 for Famitsu in my mind is actually fairly low, even if you know that there are 4 reviewers and obviously they were given an 8, 8, 8, and 9 out of 10, which would sound like it's actually fairly well. Carrion was actually a fairly well received game in the West, but in my mind that's still not that good. And perhaps that is just in my mind, or perhaps that is just a case of when you start averaging things, you expect it to be a little bit higher. Because 30 out of 40 to me is 75%.
Dazzling victory awaits.
And that doesn't sound that
You
good.
must die.
And then, like, so maybe 33 out of 30 is somewhere around an 80%. I don't know. I don't know why that doesn't feel like that's as good as it probably is. Probably because I've just seen a lot of games given the 33 out of 30 out of 40. That seems to be kind of a default review score. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article. Dagacia Games and Mages announced a co-op beat-em-up action game called Ogre Tale for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. This looks like it's a beat-em-up game from that thumbnail. Do we have anything more? And here they're going with the chibi art style, which then takes moe art style and kind of doubles it to the point where they are now at no point anatomically correct. They have giant heads and tiny little bodies. They look like kind of like Funko Pops, if Funko Pops looked good. And the chibi art style definitely predates Funko Pops. Okay, it looks like a beat 'em up game. That doesn't look terrible. And there might even be a good logical reason to have the chibi art style in a beat 'em up game, because that may save precious screen space in a game where you would want to potentially have 20 or 30 enemies on the screen at one time. Holy Wing Dragon, Pegasus, Holy Holy Flame Tiger. Let's see.
No disruptions. You wouldn't.
Let's see,
How
where
much
are
is
we
in it for
now?
me?
I do have my chat up now, so if people do want to chat, I will be able to see it. But I haven't seen any comments. See, next we have a game on Steam called Legends of Solitaire Diamond Relic,
Lovely day for a fight.
which does look like it is just a fantasy-based solitaire game
Get a bonus
with
for
some
this.
other little mini games built in, which is an interesting idea, certainly. I would say the graphics here don't look particularly great, and it would be very hard to justify playing yet another one of these solitaire games. You only really need to play one or two in your entire life. It's $8.49 discounted, and it's English full audio. This is the sequel to the popular Legends of Solitaire, which it's not being compared to that at all. It's being compared to like Slay the Spire. So Legends of Solitaire as a series is rated very positively, which once again at $4.99 it's hard to really justify playing a game like this. Like, I don't know how you can sell me on something like that.
Oh, Serpent King.
I live by the sword.
Okay, what do we want to do?
My blade is your salvation.
I'm moving too slow.
This wasn't worth it.
It did just occur to me, though, I don't know what the scenario is going to be to get me back to doing the wishlist cleanup. Because we've hit a point where enough news is happening, and with Shadowverse there's just not any daily quests right now that are getting in the way or becoming problematic, as it were. And that is, I guess, in part because I'm taking the single player daily quests instead of the multiplayer daily quests.
Dead men tell no tales.
So we're in the very enviable position that we almost never are in, where I'm actually going to manage to
Take that.
You wouldn't.
not be stuck behind some kind of incredibly arduous and long daily quest to get 3 victories. So
Raise your
yeah,
blade.
I'm gonna have to figure out if I want to spend some special time to finish with the
Overcome all.
wishlist cleanup stuff, or what. There is also an issue that might come into that, in that China has re-implemented the real name policy, it seems, as far as listing video games for sale, and that has caused like thousands upon thousands of games to not be available on sale in China. So I imagine that means we're going to see a flood in the next few days to weeks, and if not for the rest of the year, of more and more Chinese games trying to make any kind of money they can, since they can't sell inside their own country without releasing information about themselves, which I imagine they don't want to do so much. Like, people in the United States, I don't think appreciate the terror of just being on a list. The idea of not having freedom of association at all, compared to, well, in the United States with the cancel culture, we have pretty much lost freedom of association. But the idea that you could potentially get put on a list as, like, well, some people in the United States probably have this, where you get put on a list as a known gang member, and that follows you for the rest of your life, whether it's true or not. And but yeah, I could see heavily wanting to maintain your anonymity. If at all possible. And let's face it, the Chinese government kind of does have an antagonist position against video games. If they could get away with it, they would probably ban all video games, and frankly all forms of Western entertainment, which is what they have done in the past. And even the citizens of China rebelled around that and pirated a bunch of stuff. Like, there definitely was a time in the past where China was like, no, you have to read Romance of the Three Kingdoms, you have to only watch Chinese made entertainment, and even their own citizens are like, no, we're tired, we've seen these stories aren't that good.
How much is in it for me?
It would be completely unacceptable to me if the United States, for instance, said I couldn't watch anything made outside of the United States, or I couldn't play video games made outside of the United States. That would be super ridiculous. Okay. How are we gonna do this?
Now, let's have a look-see.
Iron my
Try
fair
that.
share.
Moving on, Gamatsu has a smartphone listing here. Idola Phantasy Star Saga is coming to the West. Which, what kind of game is this? It's coming to Android. Beta test.
This wasn't worth it.
It launched on iOS and Android in Japan. It's apparently an RPG. So, okay. This might be a decent quality RPG since they're talking about it, but there is also a decent chance that it isn't. Let's see.
How much is in it for
We already talked about this, but Gamatsu has Detroit Become Human, sales top 5 million, available for PlayStation 4 and PC, which I'd like to kind of know what its sales were before it launched. Let's see. Is it that they got 1.5 million when they went to PC, or Yeah, seems like they kind of kept the numbers a little hidden, and I imagine that's what you would do, because it definitely feels like it was a disappointing. It did feel like it was a disappointing number.
Welcome to the city of nightmares and despair.
Okay.
Welcome to the city of hopes and dreams.
Let's do this. Hit that. Do that. Hit that.
My lord.
Do that. Hit that.
This wasn't worth it.
Do that. Hit that. Do that. And hit that.
I love the feel of the earth. Come out wherever you are.
I need to hurry up through the news. Game of Citra has an article how Disney makes RPG mechanics work in real life at the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which it kind of feels like this is a pointless article to talk about at the moment, considering how Disney World has a small chance of being completely out of business. I guess it really would boil down to is the state of Florida going to bail out Disney World, Disneyland?
Gotcha.
Well, I guess California would have to bail out Disneyland. But Disney as a property
Love the feel of the earth.
suffering horribly because of nobody being able to go to their parks. Also kind of suffering horribly because they fired all of their talent and outsourced a lot of the employment to foreign workers, and so there's kind of a loss of culture there. Also, they wasted a ton of money buying the Star Wars franchise and then failing to monetize the Star Wars franchise appropriately.
Fall before them.
And I would say some of the other Disney
Stop.
properties have been fairly terrible. Let's not forget that they did A Wrinkle in Time and
Bury me.
and I think Atticus Finch. Is that a movie, or is that the name of the guy from To Kill a Mockingbird? Yeah, I think that's the lawyer from To Kill a Mockingbird.
Welcome to the city of hopes and dreams.
Yeah. Also, I think Disney bought Fox, didn't they? Or they bought some major merger thing. Couldn't have been Fox, could it? Maybe it was Warner Brothers. No, Warner Brothers is on sale right now from AT&T. Yep. In a funny way, it almost feels like this is going to be the death of Disney could be a great event in the sense that it would prove that mega corporations can't succeed anymore and that companies can grow so large that they collapse under their own weight. Even in the past, Disney was far too big of a company. Like, if there was actually any restriction at all on late stage massive mega corporation capitalism, they would have stopped Disney from having a amusement park on top of an animation studio. They should have said you can have one and not the other, even if the two are completely or almost completely separate. They still should have said, look, license out your Mickey Mouse characters to a separate company and keep them separate on paper at the very least, instead of one main company with one person in charge. And they definitely should have stopped Disney from purchasing and acquiring the rights to a lot of companies a long time ago.
All together now.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called VR King of Battle Cards, which looks like it's an attempt to do something like Yu-Gi-Oh, where you're playing cards in VR. You have basically a armband type interface, but then also it seems like you actually interact and play in the game, and it seems kind of tower defense-y too. It's early access and it requires VR. It's $9.99 and it's English and Russian. And at the core of it, I think it's just too ugly of a game to really be considered. This.
Now, let's have a look-see.
And this.
Come out, wherever you are.
Gamma Sutra not wanting to load very fast. So TechRaptor has an article here. Hot Gym and Lewd League Soccer are Nutaku's newest free-to-play games. They certainly do come fast and quick, to say the least, as far as these games. Although they don't seem like they ever are very good quality. So Hot Gym seems like it's a gym management game with a bunch of women, animated women in leotards and bikinis working out. Whereas Lewd League Soccer seems like it is yeah, Hot Gym is more of an idle clicker game. Lewd League Soccer seems like it's more of an action soccer game. And there's not anything too objectionable here, so here's it seems like they play in bikinis and play soccer. And Hot Gym, same thing. I kind of wish, and I have been noticing this, as I'm approaching, I think, end game state with college days or from Nutaku. Like, I don't think they put enough upkeep and maintenance to the games, and a lot of these games are clearly third-party games. They're just being published by Nutaku, where there is better ways to potentially grow an audience. Now, I would say that is Nutaku's number one flaw, is that they're owned by the same parent company as Pornhub. They don't advertise their service on Pornhub, as far as I know, and they don't grow any kind of audience or advertise anywhere else besides TechRaptor. And even if they do get the occasional new interested customer, they don't really do much to treat the customer right to make them want to stay around. Which, yeah, sure, in the old days, if you were the porn shack on the outskirts of town, of a small town, and the internet didn't exist, you would have a customer for life regardless of how terribly you treated them. And adult material always has been fairly overpriced, but now there's a lot of, the internet does exist, and there is a lot of competition, so quality needs to go up a little bit, particularly when you're talking about an interactive medium instead of a passive medium. Like, the average porn video doesn't have to be that good, but if you want people to come back day after day and play in your free-to-play game and buy the premium currency, you've got to offer something to bring them back. And in the non-adult sector, or at least mostly non-adult sector of Shadowverse, you see where the daily quests and not getting ripped off by having hundreds upon hundreds of garbage cards comes into play. That does certainly make it easier to come back day after day to this game, where honestly it was getting fairly hard to go back and play Magic the Gathering Arena. Like, there definitely were days in, and I don't even think I played Magic for 6 months, and I was already starting to be burned out on it. I was like, yeah, I didn't have time to log in. I didn't have time to re-roll the daily quest. And some of that certainly had to do with just me being inefficient but some of it definitely didn't have to do with that, and it had to do with the incredible expense that existed around playing Magic the Gathering. Expense in time, if not expense in money.
What a shame.
Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article here, and I saw this tweeted several times, so at least by Gamma Sutra, so it seems like this is a accusation that could get you sued if it's inaccurate. Apparently, the Ubisoft executive Tommy Francois didn't, quote, leave the company. He was fired. A source close to the matter confirmed to Gamma Sutra, with Ubisoft's initially claiming Francois had simply left the company. They explained Francois was terminated with cause and wasn't handed a financial settlement. He has also been suspended without pay since the beginning of July, which I'm not sure if all of this broke around July. I guess it probably did. The next sentence there, however, will, I'm sure, be disheartening to most people. Although the outgoing exec will retain whatever Ubisoft shares he had already acquired, he won't be able to make future acquisitions. That, frankly, seems like that's illegal. Like, I don't know how you could tell somebody you can't buy shares in a company without some kind of judge coming in and saying that. Because honestly, if I was a rich person and I could buy shares in some of the companies that I've worked for in the past, and just so that I take control over them and do a hostile takeover, that should be my that would be something I'd consider doing. Probably wouldn't do, but let's see. There's something weird about French laws here, because the next paragraph it says, we're told that French law prevents Ubisoft from labeling some of the recent high-level departures, which includes the, quote, resignation of Francois, fellow Vice President Maxime Belland, as dismissals. I don't know what law that would be, but I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, because French labor laws do seem to be fairly crazy. You're definitely in a weird position though with this ever-growing and expanding story with Ubisoft, because like that's just gonna be a shadow over Ubisoft forever. The move here is to probably clean house and then also start thinking about changing your name. Like, all goodwill, all association, every Google search for the company Ubisoft going forward is going to bring up this controversy. It's time to throw out everything and change the name completely. But they have to clean house first, because it doesn't really solve anything if Ubisoft changed their name to Paris Games Limited or something like that, and then there's just more controversy that happens around Ubisoft. And at a certain point, these accusations, even though it seems like almost all of them were true, they have this possibility in which they're just going to follow you anyways. So at a certain point, Ubisoft kind of needs to just go out of business completely. It needs to go bankrupt, sell itself off to a shell company, transfer employees over to the shell company, or not transfer employees over to the shell company. Like that's really where I think this would kind of go, honestly, is that you would just fire everybody. You just gotta say, we gotta go out of business. That this has been so mishandled. There's such a stink of bad business here that there's no way to get around it. And yeah, I think this is in part of the problem with the idea of the cancel culture concept, is that there is no road to redemption. And for Ubisoft in particular, it does kind of feel like there is no road to redemption.
Your strength is
So, yeah.
Sleep enveloped in serenity.
So yeah, I just don't know how you fix that. Yeah, I don't know how you get around that as an issue and have a company that has the rights to, like, the Assassin's Creed series and all of that still happen. Like, at a certain point,
You must die.
the person in charge has to kind of fall on a sword, and that's the one thing they won't do. So either a hostile takeover needed to have happened at Ubisoft after all, and they needed to have kicked out the people in charge, or the person in charge needs to retire, put new blood in there, new leadership who's really gonna clean house, and he's got to clean house so well that every single employee is happy with what he does. Because the second there's any employee that's unhappy about anything whatsoever, they are going to have in their back pocket the ability to make a complaint and say that Ubisoft hasn't changed enough or hasn't changed at all, and it still is the Ubisoft that we are now hearing about. And yeah, once again, I'll say it is disconcerting, to say the least, that there is such a large amount of stories coming out now, and there were so few stories coming out before. But I guess that kind of seems to be the case. Like, how many people had heard of Jeffrey Epstein until we had all heard of Jeffrey Epstein? Like, only perhaps a small selection of people who would have been labeled as conspiracy theorists knew the name Jeffrey Epstein before we all heard about Jeffrey Epstein. So it does seem like for decades abuse has been happening of all kinds, and it has been failed to be reported by news people, which inherently means we definitely need better news reporters. Investigative journalists are failing to do their jobs. Moving on, Game Sutra has an article. New Able Gamers program aims to educate devs and foster more inclusive industry.
Call me short.
I heard an accusation you could play The Last of Us 2 if you were completely blind.
There's no time for you slugs.
But I don't know what experience you really would have trying to play a game completely if you were completely blind, like The Last of Us 2. That is a pretty high challenge. But I also couldn't make the argument that the accessibility issues in The Last of Us 2, from what I've seen, somehow took away from the writing in The Last of Us 2, and that's why the story is weird and people don't like it. or that the accessibility issues in The Last of Us 2 are the reason why they added more muscles to the body model of Abby than even the body that they scanned in, which turns out that happened. Yeah. So not only is it a different person's face on Abby than her body, and a different person's voice on Abby than the face or the body, but they added more muscles to the body. So I have to heavily fall down the thought process that I've seen other people say that clearly somebody on the team of The Last of Us 2 had a fetish that they wanted satisfied, and the awkward sex scene in Last of Us 2 also seems to imply that, and thus they made a unrealistic character that can't really exist, and then that runs into the uncanny valley problem, whether people can properly say I'm having an uncanny valley problem and that's why I can't relate or like this character. I think a lot of people probably, if they knew that that's what was going on, would admit that's what's going on. But for most people, that just boils down to them saying, well, she looks masculine.
My lord.
Which then it gets thrown in their face that they're being chauvinistic or something because they're stating something that's fairly true, fairly obvious.
So this is my end. Such amazing skill.
My fair share.
Yeah. When I think about characters based on specific creators' own fetish, I mean, at a certain point, that's always the case. Like, there definitely is almost always a case that, like, the creator of Tank Girl had a fetish in the way they animated the Drew Tank Girl. The animator of well, like Spider-Woman or Batgirl or the mini animes there, they've all put their own preferences into how they depict those characters. In video games, there definitely is the weirdness of Lara Croft being like one of the creators' like sister or cousin, and he's like depicted it off of his sibling, and with those low polygon boobs that got criticized. Eventually he did learn to say he depicted it off of someone else, which made him sound less creepy. But the articles had already come out, and he had already been quoted as saying he had depicted it off his cousin or sister. I think it was his sister.
Let's speed things up.
And definitely when you think about the two female, like, Olsen twin clones in Duke Nukem Forever, that clearly was somebody's preference there. And then there are a plethora of early 90s, mid 80s edgy games out there that have large busted females and small hip females.
My lord. Power of mortality.
I guess the main thing that makes Abby in The Last of Us 2 stand out is that she's of a preference that most people don't have, so it's hard to relate to in a mainstream game. If The Last of Us 2 was a game like a furry game where all the other characters were furries, then I think there'd be less of a disconnect there, because people would know what they're getting at the beginning. But yeah, if Lara Croft in her next game looked like Abby, I think a lot of people would be upset because that's not what they expect to see with Lara Croft. Even in the rebooted form of Lara Croft, there was even controversy pretty much around how the new Lara Croft was kind of depicted as being less of a wall climbing, jumping Indiana Jones clone, and became more of a just average female in the reboot of the Lara Croft series. But even at that, people were able to adapt to it.
Now, let's have a look-see.
To continue with this article about Able Games aiming to educate devs and foster a more inclusive industry, the newly announced Developers Promoting Accessibility and Diversity initiative, D-Pad, they really started with it would be D-Pad-I, frankly. They didn't even get the initialism right. Aims to place more game developers who are disabled, people of color, women, or members of the LGBTQIA+ community into their APXP, which is the Accessibility Players Experience Practitioner courses. So they're already at cross odds here. The idea here, you would think from Able Gamers, is to help the developers who can make games, who have been successful and proven at making games, make their games more accessible. Now they have come at cross odds and said, no, instead of helping the developers who can make games, we're going to train people who aren't developers to become developers, which at some level that might work, but at some level I can give some really great reasons why a disabled person will never be as successful as a game developer. If you have limited or no use of your hands, you are not going to be a game programmer and a game developer, at least a programmer. Maybe there is some position out there where the lack of full use of your hands won't be a problem. But nobody with a suck blow tube, nobody with like a claw, a hook hand, nobody who is controlling things with their feet is going to type fast enough and well enough to become a programmer. If you are mentally disabled, unless you have a very unique mental disability that does not in any way slow you down or impair you when programming, you're not going to be a good game developer. Now, people of color certainly can be game developers. There's not much of an argument there. And women could be game developers. Although I would argue a woman programmer, like most programmers, can do better not in the gaming industry than in the gaming industry. Which is to say that most women are smart enough to not be abused and forced into crunch, whereas men are obsessive and often obsessed about video games, and thus they allow themselves to be abused and forced into crunch. Members of the LGBTQIA+ community, I feel like there's a fairly large amount of those people already in the video game industry, so I'm not sure if there even needs to be more. I think you might run the percentages and compare that to the percentages in the general audience and find that they may very well be overrepresented, particularly when you have such an inclusive grouping where you potentially might represent in that category. And certainly when you have such a list as this, it really does boil down to straight white males need not apply, which is not inclusive. But I don't know how you don't take it as that's exactly what they're saying.
Light upon the land.
It could also be that the number of LGBTQIA representation is in actually the video game journalist side and less in the developer side. Nothing really stops anybody of different sexualities working for a game.
My lord.
There is also always the issue about when they say people of color in the tech industry, do they include Asians in that? Because Asians have been heavily overrepresented, Asian males. But this whole idea on the face of it does seem kind of ridiculous. Are they charging for these courses? Is that it? Are they saying that they want to have more poor people included? Because that would make more sense and be more inclusive to say, hey, we're going to give out some scholarships. The only eligibility requirements is to prove that you're poor.
Wasn't worth it.
Otherwise, they are just really being, again, at cross odds. Like, and at the core of it, an organization like Able Gamers should have a charter and should have a focus for their main goal of having games be more accessible for the players. Because having a game be accessible for players is going to help thousands upon thousands of people who very well may not have been able to play a video game. A lot of disabled people who can't do much with their lives and with their time in their lives anyway, so playing video games becomes a nice escape. So that is way more of a focus, or should be way more of a focus, than having diverse developers. I want good developers, frankly, and we still are definitely struggling with that aspect, in which there are a lot of bad developers. There are a lot of developers out there that are so heavily opinionated and think that they're special because often they are in these SJW identity politics groups that they think their poop doesn't stink half the time, and they write these self-congratulatory terrible stories that nobody can relate to. There's a lot of Yoko Onos, for lack of a better description, in the video game industry, and we need, I think, more. I want to say John Lennon's, but I don't know if that reference is a accurate reference. So I'll say someone who's incredibly relatable in music would be Weird Al. Yeah. That's not even a good comparison, because Weird Al, even though he doesn't flaunt it, is like a vegetarian. But I guess he is a straight white guy, so that much. But yeah, his music's relatable fairly well. And I think that's all I want to say about this article, which really was just an excuse for me to rant more than anything. But heck, that's what half the articles are. They're either rants coming from me or rants coming from the author of the article.
Do you know my master?
And at a certain level, I wouldn't have it any other way. I want to be opinionated, and I want to share my opinions in these streams. And if people don't agree with me, that's fine. I'm totally happy with people sharing an opinion. I'm sometimes upset with people sharing the opinion that that no, you're just wrong or no, you just suck, but
Victory through steel.
if they could throw out more
Accept harmony.
words than that, that's always appreciated.
Before the might. Ha!
Defend their positions.
Sword.
There's a lot of people
Cleansing mode.
that definitely can't defend their positions and just immediately revert to attacks or fallacies. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Overwatch Summer Games 2020 skins heat up in August, or heat up August. Which here you have one of the Overwatch characters in something that looks like football gear, but then a decent amount of skin showing too. I'm not sure where the state of Overwatch really is at this point. Like, I kind of feel like most people have had their fill of Overwatch, and a lot of people who were playing Overwatch moved over to Fortnite a long time ago. And here you have a Rocket League clone game. And it's really just the fact that Activision Blizzard is running Overwatch that this game is still happening. In all fairness, I will say the skins are fairly bad too. Like for a summer event, this one seems like it's the closest to a bikini outfit, but then everything else is like huge padding and fairly ugly. Not something that I would really want to have as my skins.
To the city of hopes and dreams.
Yeah, and I guess it really comes down to, is Overwatch supposed to be kid friendly or not? Because if it's not supposed to be kid friendly, I would definitely have every character more in a summer beach fun bikini type outfit, guys and girls. You definitely see a lot of games that have DLC like that.
Sleep enveloped in serenity.
We're not having complete win streaks, but we are making progress. There is also talk, I don't know if I have an article here, but apparently Activision Blizzard employees have gotten together and started posting their salaries, and they're kind of doing it, I think, online and probably on Twitter. And there's some big surprises there in the difference in pay amongst people at similar levels and similar in the same position. And I think there's just a general shocking amount of low pay. And then at a certain point, there is, or at least in the past, there has been a case where a lot of people want to work for Blizzard, so of course they don't have to pay people much to keep them working at Blizzard or to hire them. So it really feels like it's just another nail in the coffin of Activision Blizzard.
Come out wherever you are.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of people leaving Activision Blizzard, although we've already seen a lot of people leave Activision Blizzard. And Activision Blizzard is like almost all the main big video game companies at this point. I would be happy if they all went out of business and broke up into smaller companies, because there clearly is a level of quality that is lost as these companies get so big. So yeah, I don't know if we're gonna have any more details on that. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Verdant Village, which looks like an RPG game. Maybe not made with RPG Maker, but it definitely looks like Stardew Valley, and definitely doesn't look like there's much here I'd want to play. It's early access for $14.99, English full audio. I would be interested to meet somebody that really loves the Stardew Valley, the 2D survival Minecraft Harvest Moon style of gameplay. I would say, yeah, Harvest Moon would be a better descriptor. Like, it'd be interesting to meet somebody that is just in love with that kind of gameplay and plays multiple versions of that type of game.
Shining hope.
But I don't know if such a person really exists, or too many people like that really exist. Game of Sutra has an article here how that game sold on Steam using the NB number. I don't know what the NB number is.
My lord.
The new box lighter number, which is named after Mike Boxleader, lighter. So apparently in this blog they're just proposing a new way to review sales, to re-evaluate how well your game sold on Steam. Very inside baseball, and seemingly unlikely to be super accurate.
I will protect even in death.
Ooh, you're a big fella.
At the core of it, I feel like if a game brags about a number of units sold, that's when a game
On the land.
it has been successful. If a game comes out and it never brags about a number of players or the number of sales or anything like that, then in the background they're not even willing to pay somebody to write an article to celebrate their success, so they don't feel like they have been successful. So knowing that,
Accept harmony.
as a consumer,
You're gonna regret this.
I
I'll tell you
mostly
now.
just stick around the idea if they brag, that's the beginning of their success. If they've sold 300,000 units, and that means that they've been a success, even if they're an indie developer. I suppose I might make some exceptions if you sold 100,000 units and it was one developer, but even at that point I think I'd still fairly expect to see them sell 300,000 units before thinking that they were actually successful.
Welcome to the city of hopes and dreams.
Hit that,
Wait, that's it?
that, and that. Hit that, and that.
I'll live again.
Yeah, and if you get over 300,000 sales in units for a game, that's when you're starting to hit major success. So if you get 1 million sales, yeah, that's probably good. If you're getting 5 million, then you're probably a AAA game that invested a lot more. There is probably a level in which having less than 1 million sales, if you're a AAA game, does label your game as a failure internally.
Victory
But I'm
through
not sure
skill.
I'm not sure that
Gotcha.
that is something I could ever really tell. And if you get over like 20 million units in sales, and you're at that point super successful, and a top tier success. Moving on, TechRep does an article. Baldur's Gate 3 release date has been delayed beyond August. Which, yeah. Everything's getting delayed. It's kind of pointless to even read an article beyond that. Just read the headline and go, oh yeah, it's delayed, like everything else is delayed. It's going to be a fairly boring Christmas season. The good news is nobody's going to have any money anyways, probably for Christmas, but even if that wasn't the case, it does seem like we are on the verge of, even if the consoles themselves come out, the new consoles come out, I think we will have a low chance of a lot of games being available for the consoles, which, as a PC gamer with a huge backlog, this is kind of just like the best time ever. The only thing I could say that would be nice to not be happening right now is the lack of confidence and just general whim in society. Like it's kind of hard to enjoy your video games when there's people out there that are afraid they're going to lose their house, and when people are just upset about a lot of stuff, and there's just a general unhappiness in society, and a lot of anxiety in society. But otherwise, like, adults have never had more free time, and people have never had more of a backlog. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Fallout 76 is a colossal problem event has been delayed once again. I don't know if the name of the event is a colossal problem, or if it's supposed to be that this is just a colossal problem event. I think it probably should be written, quote, a colossal problem, end quote, event has been delayed once again. Which there's kind of no reason whatsoever to talk about Fallout 76. Like, there kind of was never a reason to talk about Fallout 76, and there's still no reason to talk about Fallout 76. And yet, every now and then, people come back and like twist a knife on it. YouTube Creator Academy put out a article tweet of finding ways to be more efficient and improving your workflow. I haven't watched this video, so in all fairness, this playlist of 4 videos might teach me something new, but I think at the core of it, part of the problem with all of YouTube's suggestions and everything YouTube tells creators is that they actively try to make it seem like there is a way to succeed without working yourself to death. And if you aren't succeeding, then it is because of you, and it's not because the YouTube algorithm is actively screwing over the vast majority of small content creators. At the core of it, there is this concept here that really YouTube is the boss of content creators on YouTube, and YouTube doesn't want to make people realize that they're the boss, and they're making all the demands, and they're demanding that you post at certain times, otherwise the algorithm won't promote you, otherwise you won't be successful. They're the ones that are manipulating the system for the number of posts and the length of videos and so many other things. This is hardly 100% contract work where you can just work your own hours and you'll still succeed and take whatever jobs you want. You cannot succeed doing that on YouTube. You have to basically stream. Like, the only reason I ever streamed in the first place is because YouTube pretty much demanded it. And particularly when you get back to the workflow
Come out wherever you are.
concept, the thing that's slowing you down in the workflow, even me who does no editing, like, it would take me probably a week to put up an hour video if I did editing. The thing that number one slows me down is their terrible website. And they're telling you use upload defaults and have advertising defaults and use templates for end screens. Each one of these things does not really apply by default. You're still talking 15 minutes to an hour to get all of this done. And see, this guy here, he's like a TubeBuddy YouTuber half the time. So he uses a outside app to try to make it more efficient, and it really doesn't even solve the problem there. So yeah, there's just kind of an incredible dishonesty with YouTube if they're saying that you can actually be more efficient, when the number one thing they've done is changed the entire way that the YouTube Studio beta works compared to the old YouTube, and made everybody incredibly less efficient in the process. Here's the actual tweet. Streamlining your workflow benefits you in so many ways, including giving you more time to do things you enjoy on and off of YouTube. Take some time to work through this lesson. You can spend more time on things entertaining you. Evaluate your time management, streamline your tasks, or organize your video shoots, consider your video length.
This one's for my family.
Be interesting to see what like the comments actually are on this. Yeah, but I can't ever figure out how to see the comments on posts. Let's see, how do you do that? Let's see. You have someone here say complete uploaded templates. That would save a ton of time, pretty please. I don't know, wait. I don't know what that is. There's some people saying monetize somebody. Somebody just replied with no. Yeah.
Don't let it get to you. Don't let it get to you. Don't let it get to you.
Let's go ahead and... Can we mute this guy? Like, how do you do that? Because this guy's already annoying to me. But yeah, it is definitely worth mentioning that YouTube has done nothing to help streamline my workflow in the 5+ years I've been making videos. And I've given them direct suggestions that would make it a lot more efficient, and they didn't do anything with them. Yeah, they could have done something with them, but they failed to do anything with them. The fact that I've had to spend probably 30 hours trying to make a macro 3 different times to try and automate the uploading process, and still have yet to actually been able to use it successfully, really just goes to show the problems with the experience. E3 3 hours ago tweeted, tune into this Intellivision special event at 1 p.m. which is interesting because E3 doesn't really retweet people other than the ESA, which is their like parent company. And then An hour later, they go, anyone else playing games with their parents or grandparents? Which I guess this might be an indication that E3 is like got somebody new in charge with that, because the last time they tweeted was a retweet on August 4th, and yeah, have they said anything that wasn't a retweet since like the cancellation of E3? Like they're trying to maintain their relevancy. Yeah. July 23rd was the tweet that they had put out before that point. Like,
Light upon the land.
so yeah, they're dropping the ball as far as trying to maintain relevancy, which, in all fairness, maybe they should just realize that they're doomed and just cut the funding and cancel E3 in perpetuity. Maybe that is what's happening in the background, and that's why their Twitter feed hasn't done anything.
Be gone.
But I think you could probably shift the
My
E3
lord.
online presence into something different. Like, if I could buy E3's Twitter account, I think I could shift it into a digital expo of games that just highlights games, maybe reviews games, maybe doesn't. Turn it into a feed that just
Luminescence.
gets
Shining hope.
like sponsorship, advertisement funds to mention games that are coming out. Something along that lines. Gamatsu has an article here. The game Chinese Parents for Switch launches August 20th,
Too high.
which I think this game has already been on Steam, and it's, I think, it's kind of a weird game. It dangerously gets close to being just
My lord.
a troll game, in the sense that it's Chinese parents being depicted as stereotypical Chinese parents, which I don't know if that's inherently dishonest. It's, yeah, it does seem very much like it's a life simulator with overbearing Chinese dragon parents.
Don't let it get to you. Incredible.
How do
Don't let it get to
you
you.
silence these guys? Settings. Balance. Interesting. Well, do I have any chance of winning here? No. Let's just get away from this person because they suck.
I heed your power.
Like, I don't need somebody in my life. I don't need to play against somebody that's just gonna be a pain in the butt and emote spam. Even if I am moving slowly, they could be more. They can just wait. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article. Kawadan Azuma Manor story for Switch launches August 20th. It's available now for PS4 and PC. This seems like a monster fighting game of some sort. Apparently, the Frog Fractions game, which I should mention, came out, the Game of the Decade edition. Apparently that game is Frog Fractions, from the same publisher and developer. The original Frog Fractions wasn't on Steam. And the Hat DLC, if you buy it, does seem to add some major content. I've heard that teased, at least. So it isn't just that the Hat DLC is Hat DLC, which inherently that is in the spirit of Frog Fractions, where there is subverted expectations and hidden features in the game that you are supposed to find. There is also, though, an argument that could be easily made that Frog Fractions was only relevant in the first place because the mainstream video game journalists like Giant Bomb were all talking about it and getting hyped about it and hyping themselves up about it amongst their circle of friends, and the average game player never actually played Frog Fractions or never actually cared about Frog Fractions. That is a possibility, and now 10 years later maybe it's still the point that there actually was never any relevancy with Frog Fractions, and there still isn't, or there's only a very small amount of relevancy, much smaller than people would think. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Let's do this.
I'll teach you.
Hit that. Hit that.
I'm still hungry.
And then end the turn. So here's that game on Steam, Karadan Azuma Manor Story. It's rated mostly positive with 13 reviews, and it's from June 31st. It does feel kind of like a old school PlayStation 2 game. Well, I haven't really covered a lot of those, but we also are in this point where it fails to actually have relevancy. It is weird how these games, well, and it's also way too overpriced. It's weird how a lot of these smaller, lesser known games do really fail to get enough players to even review it. It does kind of indicate that the review system on Steam is a little bit flawed.
The forest abandoned me.
And yeah, there feels like there should be a better way. But if I was to spend extra time and say go to like opencritic.com or some other, or Metacritic, and try and look at the reviews of every game that's on my follow list, half of them wouldn't have reviews either. It would probably be helpful if it did turn out that there was a OpenCritic or Metacritic that would take the reviews and the scores from Steam if no larger reviewers have reviewed it. But even if you combined all the reviews on Steam and all the reviews on something like Good Old Games, you still probably wouldn't have 20 reviews for a lot of games. And that is definitely a problem that could be solved with this current drought of games coming out. If people really took it upon themselves to not waste their to play more games, play less common games, and expand their horizons.
This wasn't worth it.
Next we have a game on Steam called Scrutinized, which looks to me like it's an investigation game slash asset flip horror game where you're walking around the house. Let's see, $9.99, English full audio. There might be a story here worth playing, or this might really just be absolutely nothing. And at the core of it, walking around the house, finding a computer, and then looking at a computer screen might be a fairly boring gameplay loop. But I'll put it on the follow list and we'll see whether it gets enough reviews.
Light upon the land.
And then
Fate
this.
finds us all.
Take that!
Shining hope.
That. And that. And the turn. I'm dangerously close to the point of running out of cards to play. Let's see.
My lord.
Gamatsu has an article. The romance visual novel Cross Channel for All People is coming to Switch on August 20th in Japan.
My
And here
lord.
you have a bunch of
Wait, that's it?
anime girls
Our sacred
in
forest.
with their legs showing and the sky standing on like a sky water reflection. There's something to be said here that's interesting. You have a character here with a different skirt, so that ideally you would think is not the same school. Plus they're wearing flip-flops where all the other ones have brown shoes. But then you also have a fairly high variety in the socks being worn, or stockings being worn, which I'm not sure that most Japanese schools wouldn't also regulate these stocking and socks also. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if it's super controlling
You
like
won't
that.
escape.
Right.
You're done for. My arrows never miss. This'll do it.
Hit that. And then hit that. Otherwise, if it's labeled as just a visual romance visual novel, we don't really know anything. It doesn't inherently seem like it's a Yuri girl on girl visual novel. Though, so there really isn't a great depiction, frankly, of the characters.
In it for me.
It won't be long now.
Because it really didn't catch my attention or show me what any of the characters look like or make me interested at all. If anything, it comes off kind of like almost a Chinese game where there is very little interest in showing the characters.
Whoa, you're strong.
I still feel like I'm kind of failing at everything except for Portalcraft with the default decks, which may just be a case that the current meta, at least at beginning level, is just Portalcraft. Which, yeah, I need to build more decks, and I need to probably just go and look and find what the current meta decks are, and figure out if I can actually
You must die.
build the decks with those with the cards I have. I bet I can't. I bet I'm missing a ton of cards that would be very helpful. Moving on, Gamasutra has this blog, expression-bodied members to reduce your code verbosity, which is a C#, I guess, tutorial. I don't know what an expression-bodied member would be, per se. Like, they're showing a code snippet here of a class, and I was not trained in class programming. I was trained in functional programming, and thus have never fully been able to embrace class programming, although some of it does seem like it makes sense in larger programming projects. I guess it really comes down to whether you're learning a style of programming in anticipation of working on code that would be written by dozens of different coders versus functional programming making a lot more sense and being easier to understand if you're the only programmer working on it.
Is my end.
But see, here we have a function of getting some information, and then you have a function here as creating a new variable or a new class used inside of it. And then you have a start function here that is running another function, and then you have another function here that is doing that. That is at the end returning more data. Mostly it seems like this is just kind of an awkwardly or overwritten class to get data from this website API and then return it, which
I live by the sword. No one gets past me.
I will say it does look like this is overwritten for what it would be doing. What is the problem with that? You see, verbosity is my problem.
That's it?
Do you really need so many curly braces? Do you really need these keywords such as get and return? A very standard driven verbosity level program will tell you need all of it. So they're going to suggest instead to make a private string that includes this information, and then using the private string and some functions. So, yeah. If I'm not misunderstanding this, I think what he's suggesting here is to have a function call basically happen at the same time you're defining a value, which if you can keep it below about 80 characters, I think is alright, although it does run into the problem of when you come back and try and look at the code, you may not see the right half of a sentence, and you might just assume that you're just establishing a string here instead of establishing a function call that then establishes the string. And verbosity often is better in coding, because the part that he's really not touching upon here is, while this may be super long, and there's ways to fix this. In most coding languages you can put the curly brackets at the end here and save yourself one line, but in most codes you also would want a comment here and a comment at the very beginning, and a comment here, and a comment at nearly every single line saying what you're doing, and that is going to inherently add verbosity anyways. It's going to make you long-winded, it's going to make you talk more and type more, and that's just good code documentation. So yeah, sure, you can squash everything down here, but then you're still going to need a comment here, still going to need a comment here, still going to need a comment here. Let's see. So this really seems like a blog by somebody saying their own opinion, when there's already been examples and smarter people than this person that kind of knows why this is not the right way. And it really isn't the right way. Because this really is an experience thing, and I won't even pretend like I'm experienced in programming much or C#, but I can tell you that I understand and appreciate experience in this fairly well. The reason why you do something like this is because while on day one of programming your code might look like this, where there's only one line per class function, but by day 7 you'll have added 5 more lines of code here, 5 more lines of code here, 5 more lines of code here, and it will have grown in such a way that if you did write it shortened like this, you would just have confused yourself and caused yourself more wasted time to backtrack and make sure you're putting code in the right place, in the right order, and make it all look pretty, which this really inherently is boiling down to an obsession with your code looking pretty when it shouldn't look pretty, because it's not for end users, it's for yourself and other programmers to know what's going on and be able to make changes on the fly. I think there's a fairly high percentage of people out there that think they know a better way to program, and a lot of it does almost break down to just religious opinions at a certain point, and there is definitely a lot of dogmatic belief in different ways to program. As I said, like, I am like I was trained in functional programming. It would be very believable and understandable to me if I had just stuck with functional programming and said functional programming is the best and class programming is just overcomplicated and confusing. But I was willing to try and learn it, and I was able to see some benefits to it in some cases. I think there aren't always benefits to functional programming. I mean, to class programming over functional programming, but there definitely are points where class programming is better and the right choice. Anyways, moving on. Komatsu has an article, Wintermore Tactics Club for the PS4, Xbox One, and Switch launches September 10th. Apparently this is a tactical game. Seems like it's a group of people playing Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. This looks weird. And what really concerns me about this is the fact that this is on Steam and it came out on May 5th, and apparently I missed it. It's $14.99. It's rated very positively. It's English full audio. I'm gonna put it on the follow list just because I want to think about this a little bit. It's tagged as a kind of visual novel, and I don't think it really is. I think it's half a story-based experience and half a RPG game, which I think I'd be alright with dealing with that. Like, in a lot of ways, playing a visual novel, half RPG, is way more interesting than playing a visual novel completely alone. Microsoft made an interesting announcement. They have expanded their partnership with Samsung. Apparently they had a partnership with Samsung, allowing you to play a lot of Xbox games, I believe is the idea. The Xbox Games Pass is going to let you stream games to Samsung phones or directly play on Samsung phones. And I would say Google is definitely at risk of Samsung kind of taking control of Android as an industry, as a platform, because Samsung has good hardware and they're willing to make their own software a lot of times. See, this ends August 19th, so I'm hoping that this goes around and we get more rewards after this last reward. Otherwise, they weren't expecting everybody to log in as much as they did. Okay. I'm still like 8 hours from the daily quests, and 2 victories from getting temporary gems. Regardless, though, I made some victories there for 20 gold, some victories there for 20 rupees. I made it to rank 25, so we now have 3 Quick Blader animated cards. That's how I'm getting all these basic card animated. We got level 30 on Polar Craft, so Automation Knight is animated. Also, because we're getting score rewards of some amount. Interesting. Well, this might suck more than it seems, because while it's nice that I'm getting these rewards right now, it is also indicating to me that once I get the unlimited rank up to 1200, I'm going to have to make more progress that way. Either that, or I have just not made any progress at all in rotation, which that might actually be the case. Yeah, let me see if I can rephrase that so it makes more sense. So in rotation, we are rank D0 at 1200. Either I've gotten no experience whatsoever, and thus I've got no monthly rank rewards, or I'm going to get unlimited to D0 also, and then I'm not going to get any monthly rank rewards because I'm not going to be able to win any further than that, and that would really, really suck. I think I'm a little burned out at this point of playing the game. So let's cover the news, and then I think I'll maybe open a pack, and then we'll call it a day. We can look here before this though. We can just see where we are with ranked matches. 5 Havencraft, 5 Portalcraft, and still no Bloodcraft at all. Yeah. Score here is 1200, and the next would be 750 more points. So yeah, I must have just not gotten any score at all, and clearly I need to go back and try and see if I can get some victories on rotation to see how that affects things. Alright, but let's wrap up the news here. Gamatsu has an article, is it wrong to try and pick up girls in a dungeon? Infinite combat for PC is delayed by 1 to 3 weeks in the West. Okay, that's easy enough to mention and move on. Let's try and get as many tabs open as possible. Let's see, Gamatsu has an article, Giraffe and Anika is coming to Xbox One August 27th. This is a game that looks slightly interesting. It's available now on Steam, and it's on my follow list as like a cute anime kind of RPG game. I don't think it's much of an RPG, and it may just be kind of more of a basic action game. But it's rated very positively, so I'm going to move this over to the wish list because it meets all the requirements. It's $19.99, and arguably maybe that's too expensive. It's being mostly compared to A Hat in Time, which, while I didn't like A Hat in Time, that style of game does have an intrigue for me. So that is something I would like to see. I'd like to see a game like that that's better. Gamatsu has an article, 9 Monkeys of Shaolin launches October 16th, a Chinese set beat 'em up. Okay. Haven't seen a game quite like that. And let's see what it actually looks like when it's not just showing a trailer. Okay, that looks different. And it's on Steam. When did it come out? October 16th? It's not out yet. Alright, well, I'll put it on the fall list. But yeah, that is once again something different. Phantasy Star Online 2 is out on Steam now, which it's kind of interesting because this is not Phantasy Star Online Regenesis, which would be in parallel. It's a free-to-play game, and in-app purchases, online co-op. So I don't think this is really a game I could play or criticize, but it's nice, I imagine, for people that wanted to play Phantasy Star Online but wanted it on Steam. That would almost certainly be the people who have already been paying Phantasy Star Online, though, outside of Steam. Also, apparently, it's rated M with blood and partial nudity, which I didn't think Phantasy Star Online was particularly mature as a game. Although I really didn't know what it was. Like, I'm actually very surprised in some of the depictions here of sword wielding and dragon fighting and monsters. Like, I thought Phantasy Star Online was more of a sci-fi mech game and more akin to Second Life, where there wasn't even actually a gameplay loop, because that's pretty much the screenshots I've seen. I'm not sure if I've just been misled or have just not been paying attention. Now, it is, I guess, worth also mentioning that it's available in 33 new countries on Steam, not worldwide. So there are still some places, some territories where it's not. And this coincides with episode 4 being released, which really am uncertain as to when that game originally came out. Gamma Sutra has a article here: celebrating tech's unsung women, pioneers Romero calls for game dev gender parity. So yeah, this is pretty much an opinion piece, and it all just once again is going to boil down to, is the reason why there are fewer females working in the video game industry because females are not welcome, or is it because females are just smarter and have more opportunity than men? And I would argue that the truth is that they often are just smarter and more have more opportunity than men. And until you address that, and the only way you really address that is either removing the intelligence or the opportunities of females, or increasing the intelligence or opportunities for males. Apparently, this nun created BASIC, which, alright, that's, although if she's being called sister, I don't think that actually is a nun. Sister Mary Kenneth Keller, early computer pioneer who helped create BASIC. BASIC, very odd programming language. It something like it had to have been created in the day, but it's not particularly a great programming language. It would be fairly nice, though, to have that instead of just learning assembly language, which is what most people were doing before then. BASIC is probably one of the first compilers out there that isn't just directly taking machine code. But in the old days, when computers weren't very powerful, people were programming things in assembly code because they needed to. That's why, like, most NES games were programmed in assembly code. And this picture kind of goes to show that there was a fairly large amount of females in the early computer days. It's particularly the video game industry itself where that stopped being the case. There was a lot of females in, like, Atari, but once that second generation happened, they got better opportunities or they got pushed out. And I would say in the computer eras, in computer jobs, still there's a fairly large amount of females in computer and programming. It's just not game development. The gamer bro mentality probably caused some of that, although it might be very much a self-fulfilling prophecy where females just assume that all game developers are going to be gamer bros and not even try, although sometimes it seems fairly obvious that is the case. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Pokemon 3 Deluxe delivers new missions, cooperative play options, and all previous DLC, which is to say that Pokemon 4 is still in development. I mean, not Pokemon, Pikmin 4. Which, okay. My real question is, can you play Pikmin 1 and 2 on Switch? Because that I'm not sure about. And it might not particularly work very well to play Pikmin 1 and 2 on Switch. But you probably could get away with it. It feels like instead of releasing a deluxe edition of the third game, they should instead have released a bundle of all 3 games. But maybe Pikmin 3 Deluxe has DLC, which are the events of the first game. There is something to be said about Pikmin 3 having 3 playable characters, or looking like it has 3 playable characters, and the idea possibly being that they're not willing to release a Pikmin 4 until they can have 4 playable characters, which on the Switch would be kind of hard to do. Can you connect 4 different controllers to a Switch? I think you can, 4 different Joy-Cons, but then you would need 1 Joy-Con to be able to control the character completely, which you probably could do. Nintendo is always in this weird position where it constantly has to just create more and more content to support its own platform, because it just doesn't have enough partners that can make good games for their weak consoles. Moving on, Gamasutra has an article. Call of Duty franchise helped Activision Blizzard to record Q2 results. This might have been in part the reason why people are posting their salaries, is that Activision Blizzard listed its financials and people were upset with either high numbers or low numbers. Let's see. We don't need to talk about that a second time. TechRaptor has an article here. Asteroids, Missile Command, and Pong blockchain games are in the works, which is to say the company that bought out Atari is trying craziness to make money off of Atari with blockchain games. I assume that's what they're trying to do, is Bitcoin mine with the blockchain. Otherwise it makes no sense to have blockchain technology in games unless they have a really good pitch. Unfortunately, I really don't have time to read this article to figure out what their idea would be. And the vast majority of things that have blockchain in their name or that use blockchain technology are just doing it to chase a fad. TechRaptor has an article here. Windbound sets sail in the wrong direction. Which I guess this is actually a review. A Zelda by any other name would be just as sweet, apparently. Why is it so zoomed in on this article, on this page? I would love Windbound. I want to love Windbound, I really do, but I can't help but feel that it's wasting your time, I assume, is what it's supposed to read. No, I don't know why this page is misshaped like this and zoomed in so much. I'm just gonna toss it out here that there's a Gamma Sutra article here, how Pokemon Go evolved in response to COVID-19 pandemic. I would say it's also kind of nice that no longer am I having to talk about things directly being delayed due to COVID-19. They seem to have worked through all of that. So yeah, I'm not having to mention the pandemic as much as I was a couple months ago, even though it is definitely affecting everything, and it is just the known factor in the background. Next we have a game on Steam called The Nightmare, which looks like a flashlight spotlight horror asset flip game with major dark screenshot syndrome, considering the flashlight ability. It's 99 cents, English only. There doesn't seem like there's enough there to be a good product. TechRaptor has an article here. You can join a cult in Honey, I Joined a Cult 2021, which apparently is a game that's coming out. Let's see if we can get a general idea. This is from Team 17, so it's basically the Escapist game all over again, just a building management simulation game. So for instead of being a prison this time, it's a cult, which that ain't much of a difference, really. I don't think I'd see a good reason to go back and try and play any of those Team 17 style games. Gametsu has an article, Saviors of Sapphire Rings and Stranger of Sword City revisited and coming to the West for Switch and PC in 2021. It was also known as Blue Winged Chevalier in Japan. See, can we see a video of it? It's like two games that must be sequels to each other. And we've got anime fantasy characters. I don't know if this is an RPG or a visual novel though. Looks like an RPG. Maybe a bit of a dungeon crawler RPG from that perspective. Yeah, they're tagging them as RPGs. And we're at a certain point where I'm not sure if something is coming to the West, it's because it actually was successful, or if it has just gotten to the point where it's very easy and very financially viable to localize and bring something to the West, even if it isn't a very successful game. Next we have games that are coming to Xbox Game Pass relatively recently, like Darksiders Genesis are coming to console, and Man of Medan, whereas It Lurks Below and I don't even know what that says, Xena Crisis are coming to console and PC, plus Trial Takers and Final Fantasy VII and Undermine. Yeah, Xeno Crisis. So, yeah. Things showing up for Xbox Game Pass. If I just had a console, I probably would own Xbox Game Pass. It's a pretty good deal. And we haven't heard any new rumors about Xbox Live Gold, the service for paying for online play, going away or anything like that. I think they're still waiting to announce that. TechRaptor has a review for Hellbound, which is like a Doom style first person shooter, which I don't know if you really need something like that in your life. Although if this is a modern engine and a polished idea of Doom, that'd be an interesting comparison to the remake of Doom. Although in a lot of ways it might just feel like a throwback more than you'd like it to. They gave it a 6.0 They say Hellbound's core gameplay loop is punchy, satisfying, and cathartic. It's just a shame there's so little of it. Pros of the core gunplay feels great. Nails the 90s shooter atmosphere. Beautiful, colorful visuals. Cons, not enough content, very little enemy variety, and confusing level design. So, yep, no reviews there. TechRaptor has an article. Airy in the Secret of Seasons needs a few more months of summer, which I don't know if this is a review or if this is just an announcement of a delay. This game doesn't look like it is particularly a great game. Doesn't look very polished. It's definitely concerning that Airy in the Secret of Seasons is so close to launch. It has too many issues with unexpected bugs. General lack of polish. The title could still probably use a few months in order to show some promise. The concept is still exceptional, and the world of Valdi looks beautiful, especially when accompanied by the soundtrack. Still, if you're expecting Airy in the Secret of Seasons to be the next great action adventure, you might want to hold off and wait to see how all of it pans out. Or something like that is what I tried to read. We have about 10 more tabs to go. And my fingers are hurting today. Yep. I think my arthritis is starting to act up. Which there's really no great justification for that, because if I'm just auto-playing the story in Shadowverse, I'm not even using the mouse, except for like maybe one click every 5 minutes. Well, regardless, Gimatsu has an article. Classics-inspired survival horror game Tormented Souls has been announced for PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Okay. This is kind of hard to tell what kind of outfit this is. I don't know if this is a medieval fantasy outfit or if this is a leather jacket. Do we have a video that could give me a better idea? Yeah, it seems like we got somebody in a bathtub, in a bloody bathtub, waking up. Let's just make sure this is YouTube family friendly before I show any more. A classic survival horror. Apparently the person put some clothes on outside the bathtub. So it's kind of like the beginning of Saw, where they wake up in a bathtub. They're in an abandoned mansion, and there's going to be all kinds of creepiness, and it's going to be effectively like an escape the room game with maybe some animations on top of it. And definitely there's some themes of being a sister existing. Okay. That does feel a lot like a Silent Hill style game. It definitely feels like a Silent Hill style game, so I'm going to put this on the follow list. It's being published by P-Cube Limited, which has published some other games, although not hugely big AAA games, so we shouldn't expect a giant horror Silent Hill style game. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 6-hour experience and that's it. But we haven't seen anything quite like that in a while. Gamatsu has an article. Necromundia Under Hive Wars launches September 8th. Apparently it's a tactical RPG. Do we have a trailer here? This is a interesting, like, wasp-like creature, masked like people. It feels like a darker take on a Mad Max game with like VATS, which is interesting. And it seems like there's a lot of customization of the outfits, which is cool. I guess the real question is, can you play solo? And it just said play solo. Or 3 players. Interesting. So then the question is, there any single player content really, or is it just you can play solo against other people? I guess that wouldn't really be playing solo, would that be? Alright. It's based off of a tabletop game called Necromundia, the most famous hive world of Warhammer 40k. So it's based off of a Warhammer 40k spin-off. So it's already got some backstory and some fandom to it, which that might be helpful. Next we have a game on Steam called United Command, which seems to be a military real-time strategy game, which, if any of these screenshots would load, I think would quickly depict them as being fairly terribly animated. It's discounted to $2.99. It's English, allegedly full audio. And then you've got a whole bunch of other people's flags besides American flags. So I don't know what military you're actually controlling. Yep, this looks pretty low polygon. It maybe was a cell phone game at one point. But yeah, I don't see any reason why you would want to play a game like this when you can play Command & Conquer Remastered instead, which has way more relevancy and plenty of gameplay. Next we have a game on Steam called Tesla Force, which is a top-down twin-stick shooter, which we have seen a considerable decline in low-effort top-down twin-stick shooters in the past couple of months, which is nice. At one point it would be really cool if somebody introduced just a whole new gameplay style and they invented something brand new, whole cloth. Unlikely that would happen, but it would be interesting, certainly. Yeah, but you could, there's still a lot of games that try to combine two different ideas, and sometimes that works, rarely it works. This game is $15.29 English, full audio. I don't see anything here that particularly interests me, and there seems to be kind of an overemphasis in showing this map or skill map, and then there's a lot of like thin, narrow areas apparently too, instead of giant open world dungeons. Next we have a game called The Citadel, which is tagged as an old school retro first person shooter. And yeah, this looks like a Doom clone with a disconnected animated thumbnail. Like, none of these characters look anything like this character, nor does it look like there is a like visual novel element where you would see this character and talk to him much. Yeah, the idea of running around like some cult's citadel or some demonic citadel is an interesting idea. And she just kicked the person off, so you're playing as this character apparently, which means you're never going to actually see her. It is slightly cartoony in the gun style, but then the enemy style and the wall style doesn't match that animation. This is $13.49, which is too expensive. English and Japanese. Yep. Just not enough polish there for that idea. There might be something to that. Doing effectively like a Doom mod to make it look more anime in style would be something to think about. But I don't think it would change much. Next we have a game called Empyrean Galactic Survival, which looks to me like it's a space game. Although it says it's an open world survival craft game. Interesting. I'm gonna put this on the fall list to think about it. I probably don't want to play this game because the visual polish is a little lacking, but I'm gonna think about it. They're highlighting the fact that it's a 64-bit game, which I haven't seen that in several years. $17.99. Pretty much Steam is shifting a lot of people away from having 32-bit games anyways. Not that it's going to really improve the performance of your game too much if you do a bad job porting your game to 64-bit. In theory, 64-bit will save you time, but only if you actually optimize your code, which I imagine a lot of game developers don't know how to do that or won't spend the time to do that. TechRaptor has a review here for a game called Scully. This is the one that looked a little bit like Glover, where you play as a ball and then sometimes you jump into pits of mud and can turn into other things. Looked like it might be an interesting game. It really would have just come down to how it played. TechRaptor seems to think it didn't play well, giving it a 5.5. There are moments where Scully is an exciting and charming adventure through an island paradise. It's just buried under too much annoyances and level design issues. Pros are rolling and jumping feel nice, and it has an appealing art direction. Cons are its infuriating level design and pacing and tedious puzzles. Okay. So either I believe this writer in his review, or I reject it wholly, so I'm gonna lean towards believing them. TechRaptor has an article. Tombstar is the next rooting tooting game from No More Robots. Okay, so we have a tease of a game, which I don't even remember what No More Robots is. I recognize the name, but I couldn't tell you what the game actually was. But that really is just an announcement for game, which we've had incredibly few announcements for games coming out lately, which is fine. It saves a lot of time. And then TechRaptor has an article. The Intellivision Amico has been delayed to 2021, which again, I don't think the company that owns Intellivision now has anything to do with Intellivision then. I heard someone say, and I have to take great umbrance with this idea, is that horror games were one of the first style of video games to come out. And I don't know what in the world they were thinking to make that claim, because it is just blatantly wrong. Like, first of all, if you think about Pong, like the emotion, it was phrased more that horror was like one of the first emotions to come out, and it was from that bad reviewer talking about The Last of Us 2 that doesn't know how to review anything, and this is the first time. Very interesting to watch somebody try their first video reviewing a game and just come off so badly wrong. Kind of objectively wrong in this case, because like, yeah, Pong does not instill a sense of horror at all. So when you go back to the first video game, that's Pong. Pong instills a sense of intrigue, awe, exhilaration, action. That's what you would get from Pong. When you start to think about like all of the original arcade games like Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Missile Command, all of those original ones, none of those had any visuals that could actually bring about horror. Now you could make a very stretched argument that maybe there's the horror of losing your quarter towards the arcade games, but that's about it. In fact, probably the first video game that would even have a beginning of something that would invoke the emotion of horror would be Popeye, in the sense that Bluto in the Popeye arcade game kidnaps the female character that Popeye's in love with. I forget her name. That's probably the first instance of horror. But then, as you go further down this route, like the actual first horror game, I don't know if there was even a single horror game that came out for the Famicom and I'm fairly certain there probably wasn't anything horrific that came out for the NES. That there may have been some Japanese only specific horror game that at that point would have had the graphics high enough that you could actually have a horror game. But yeah, I don't think there was anything for the NES. If you were trying to play like one of those multi-user online dungeon style games that were just using text, perhaps in some of those text-based games you had a few that were horrific, but those would not be the first games by any means. So it was just a incredibly stupid and myopic argument to make. Honestly, I wouldn't say that there's ever been a point in the video game industry where horror was superiorly prevalent. Like, it happened, certainly. There was the Saw-based games, there was Condemned Criminal Origins. You could certainly say, like, Bioshock have some horror and bloody and violence, and Doom. I think that was the reference he was trying to say, is like Doom was the first game as an example. And I'm like, Doom in no way was the first game. Maybe it was the first game you played, but boy have you not done your research, your history. By far, the sense of exhilaration and adventure are the first games. Even if you were going to say like Oregon Trail was supposed to be a horror story, not really, but even if you tried to make that argument, it really wouldn't play. Well, anyways, to get off that rant, we have the Humble Bundle here. I think I also closed several of my wishlist cleanup tabs, which sucks, but I'll open them up from history. We have Bohemia Interactive as a game bundle, and then there's Humble Choice bundles about to end, and the Paradox Interactive bundles about to end. So we probably will get more game bundles in the next couple days. Bohemia Interactive, if you pay $1, you'll get a game I don't recognize, which looks like a visual novel. A game called Take on Mars, which I don't recognize. Some other games I don't recognize. If you pay more than the average of $15.08, you have 4 more games I don't recognize, with the exception of Arma 3. And I guess maybe Arma is a big system seller, because the $20 tier for Arma 3 DLC is all Arma 3 content. Okay. And if you pay $30, then you'll get Arma 3 Contact and DayZ. So this feels like a particularly bad Humble Bundle unless you absolutely love Bohemia Interactive's content games, and I don't think I do. And then that brings me back to my Twitter feed, and let's see if there's any new news worth mentioning. I see a demo that I'll skip has come out. We are yeah, we are back to the point where very few demos are happening. A Star Fox with cats called Whisker Squadron is coming to Kickstarter soon. We'll talk about that on Friday. It's called, what's the name of it? Whisker Squadron? Yeah. It looks like the original Star Fox game, though, in its current depictions, which apparently the Nintendo New York City store is reopening with many restrictions, which that's not super really video game news. I did confirm that the NES Lego set does work with the Mario little Mario Bluetooth device that plays sounds. It does work by having a thread of different colored Lego plates under his feet, and so when you're spinning the screen on the TV to make it look like movement, it moves the color under his feet and plays sound effects. I would argue that if the Mario playset figurine, which is like $60 and is separate, if that becomes really, really cheap, then I'd probably get it. Otherwise, I would just get the NES playset. Also, the NES Lego playset does come with a cartridge with Super Mario Brothers, a Super Mario Brothers cartridge, which is a sticker. There's only 2 stickers in the whole set. Most people don't like stickers, but in those cases, they probably had to be stickers. And the cartridge actually does slide into the NES box and work and snap downward. So it's fairly interesting design, fairly expensive design, but I think I'll probably get it. And I'm not sure that there really is a lot of room to change what is on the screen, so I imagine I'll see a lot of custom Lego designers changing what shows up on the retro TV to other games, unless they want to release like expansion packs for that one set, which would be very weird. A Microsoft spokesman has commented on the recent Xbox Live Gold rumors. The quote here is, "There are no changes being made to the experience of the service or Xbox Live Gold," which there is another Xbox event coming in a month, so they might be lying, but you've kind of been told directly that no, Xbox Live Gold isn't going away. But if you also parse what was said, there's no changes being made to the service or Xbox Live Gold. You may not be changing the service if you change the price down to 0. So he may have thought about a way to wiggle around that and found a way to double speak it. Because you aren't really changing the service if you're making it free. You're still, it would just be everybody gets Xbox Live Gold for free by default. And then they could potentially ban people from Xbox Live Gold as its own separate thing instead of integrating it as you just always get online service. Actually, that works fairly well, because if everybody who owned an Xbox was allowed to play online no matter what, it would then become very, very difficult to ban cheaters. So by keeping everything separate, you can say, well, you still get to keep and use your Xbox, which you paid for, but the service, you violated the terms of that service and only that service, and thus you're banned from that point, which would be a little bit nicer compared to, say, being banned from Steam, where there are definitely ways I think you can be banned from Steam and not be able to play your games at all, even offline. Or in more recent occurrences to me, being banned for 7 days on Magic the Gathering Arena and then not really being able to log in or sell an account or trade cards. You can't trade cards anyway, so I'd have to sell an account, which is also probably against their rules. Well, anyways, here's Whisker Squadron coming to Kickstarter, and you can see it's fairly rough, low polygon stuff right now. But I could see this just being in development artwork and not a final product. And even if this was a final product, I might be willing to tolerate it just so that I could play something like Star Fox 64 on PC. But I would like improved graphics over that. See, we also have a game that came out on Steam called Casino Life Poker, which I'm still looking for a decent like Texas Hold'em poker game on Steam. Question is this real world money? Is it in-app purchases? Yes, it is in-app purchases and online player versus player. Two things I am not looking for in that. TechRaptor has an article. The more Intellivision's Amico games revealed in the special event. What were these games? Because they also announced a delay. A packing game called Astro Smash. Intellivision Battle Tanks, Sesame Street. Intellivision board games. Apparently Telestrations, Blank Slate and Ink and Gold. A Hot Wheels game, a Monster Spades game, Breakout, Missile Command. Some very, very basic games. Fingy and Fox, and a lot of kid sounding names too. Earthworm Jim 4. It really feels like what this device is, and I haven't been paying a lot of attention to this Intellivision Amico, but it does make it feel like it is basically a toy that they're trying to sell. And see, they have like an hour-long presentation here. So yeah, there's like an hour and 20-minute long presentation here. Seems like it's a nostalgia piece and a toy, not a actual console that is actually going to compete against any other consoles, even the Switch as a competitor. Seems like it's already going to be blown out of the water based on that. Alright, let me just double check. Oh, nope, my phone died because I didn't have it plugged in. Stupid me. Let me just check to see if anybody chatted in the chat. It doesn't look like anybody did. Maybe that's my fault because of issues of losing the chat and stopping the stream and then starting the stream again. That's going to be it for the stream. I've still got lots of things to do. I said we were going to open a pack. I guess we'll do that real quick. I don't want to be made a liar when I can avoid that fairly easily. This game kind of does give you enough packs. Not to get to this 400 point, not without potentially buying a whole bunch with gold, which I'm almost to the point where I could buy 40 packs in the next expansion. But if you just log in every day and do that, you do get 1 or 2 packs every single day. So over the course of 3 months, we're talking about 180 packs, and there aren't that many cards. Frankly, I'm starting to get to the point where it's like, yeah, I already have at least 2 copies of Artifact Scan. This is probably new. Draconic Call, randomly put one of the highest cost Dragon Craft followers from your deck into your hand. If Overflow is activated, randomly put 2 of the highest cost Dragon Craft followers in your hand instead. Which there's probably a great synergy here, where you would bring in a very high cost Accelerate card that you could play with Accelerate. This is an interesting art piece because it's just a bunch of dragons and it's animated in kind of a different style to a lot of the other animations. We have, I believe, 3 of these. I believe we have 3 of these. I believe we have 3 of these. And I bet we have 3 of these. Yeah, it really is getting to that point. Whiplash Imp. This might be new. And I just got 2 of them, which is kind of great. If Wrath is activated, get +1/+4, rush and drain, enhance for 6 to summon Imp Lancer. No, I know I have at least one of these. And this is the Imp Lancer, which this is a fairly scantily clad demon outfit. So let's go over to our cards and see where we are with our extras, because we may literally have an extra legendary at this point. Nope, we don't. So I must have just gotten 3 copies of that legendary. Alright, well, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. And on the subscribe, I'd say let's get a pyramid scheme going. To steal a concept that's used by a podcast. Get your friends to subscribe to my channel. It doesn't matter even if they watch my videos. I'm just looking for subscribers. It'd be nice if they watch my videos. I right now don't even care about it. I just want to get to 1,000 subscribers so I can get a few pennies. And I promise once we get ads, it's not going to be mid-roll ads all over the place. Probably not going to be mid-roll ads at all. But it would be nice if after 5 years of effort, this somehow turned into a actual viable job. Otherwise, if you wanted to support me, you could friend me on Steam and gift me a gift card or a game off my wish list, or you can support me through Patreon. And there's a bunch of social media links down below you can follow me on also. That's it for the stream. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.